The wind howled across the jagged peaks of the Nimbus mountain range, a symphony of nature that had greeted the dawn on Erythra for millennia. Perched on the highest summit like a crown of technological achievement stood Celestia Academy, humanity's premier flight institution. Its gleaming spires reached toward the clouds, challenging the very sky itself. In room 217 of the Eastern Dormitory, Lyra Vesper stood before her window, watching the aerial dance of the Aralis in the distance. These native creatures of Erythra, with their elongated bodies, translucent wings, and iridescent scales, moved through air currents with an elegance no human machine could match. Not yet. Anyway. "Today's the day," she whispered to herself, adjusting the collar of her cadet uniform. The insignia of Earth, her home planet, gleamed beside the Academy's winged emblem. 3 years of theoretical studies, simulator training, and minor flights had led to this moment, her first official flight trial. Lyra's eyes drifted to the photograph on her desk. Her father, Captain Julian Vesper, smiled back at her, his flight helmet tucked under his arm. The edges of the picture had worn from years of handling, but his confident smile remained unchanged. He had been among the first humans to master Erythra's treacherous skies before his craft had malfunctioned during a routine patrol 7 years ago. She was 14 then, old enough to understand death, but too young to accept it. "I'll make you proud today," she promised the photograph, slipping it into her breast pocket. The Academy's intercom crackled to life. "All trial pilots, report to Hangar 7. Repeat, all trial pilots to Hangar 7. Lyra took a deep breath and grabbed her flight jacket. As she stepped into the corridor, fellow cadets moved aside, some offering encouraging nods, others whispering behind her back. "Earth girl thinks she can break the Sky God's record," she heard someone mutter. "Ambitious," another replied, "or delusional." Lyra kept her gaze forward. The Sky God's record, named after the legendary Aralis who had flown through the electric storm of Nimbus at speeds thought impossible, had stood unchallenged for a century. No human had come close. Most didn't dare try. Hangar 7 buzzed with activity when Lyra arrived. Mechanics made final adjustments to the sleek Mistral X-09 crafts, the Academy's most advanced training vehicles. Unlike the bulky transport ships that ferried people between Earth and Erythra, these were built for speed and agility, with swept-back wings and needle-like fuselages. "Vesper!" a sharp voice called. Professor Marin Sol approached, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Despite her stern appearance, her eyes held a warmth that few students noticed. "Your craft is in Bay 12. I've personally checked the systems." "Thank you, Professor," Lyra replied, surprised by the special attention. Professor Sol lowered her voice. "Your father was one of my best students. He would be—" She paused, emotion briefly crossing her features. "Well, he'd tell you to trust your instincts up there. The machines can only take you so far." Before Lyra could respond, the hangar doors slid open to reveal Director Harkin Drace, tall and imposing, with a perfectly trimmed beard and cold eyes. He commanded attention without effort. The room fell silent as he strode to the center platform. "Cadets," his voice boomed without need for amplification. "Today's trial is a simple ascent and navigation course. Reach the marker at 15,000 feet. Navigate the 3 checkpoints and return to base. Nothing spectacular is expected." His gaze swept across the room before landing on Lyra. "Nothing reckless will be tolerated." Lyra felt the weight of his stare. Director Drace had made his opinion of Earthborn pilots clear. They were guests on Erythra, permitted to learn but never to excel beyond their Erythran counterparts. The fact that Lyra had openly discussed breaking the Sky God's record in her application essay had not endeared her to him. "To your vessels," Drace commanded. "Launch sequence begins in 15 minutes. The cadets dispersed, moving toward their assigned crafts. Lyra walked briskly to Bay 12, where her Mistral X09 waited. Unlike the standard silver-blue Academy colors, hers bore a small customization, a streak of deep crimson along the wing edges, the same shade as her father's old flight suit. She ran her hand along the cool metal surface. "Let's show them what we can do," she murmured. The pre-flight check was routine. Lyra had performed it hundreds of times in simulators. Fuel levels optimal, navigation systems online, atmospheric calibration adjusted for Nimbus altitude. Everything seemed perfect. As she settled into the cockpit, she noticed something unusual, a faint smell like ozone, stronger than the typical electrical scent of a new craft. She frowned, making a mental note to mention it to the mechanics after the trial. "Cadet Vesper, status report," came the controller's voice through her headset. "All systems nominal," she replied, pushing the concern aside. "Ready for launch sequence." "Acknowledged. You are cleared as 5th in the sequence. Stand by." Lyra watched through the cockpit's transparent canopy as the first 4 cadets launched. Their Mistral crafts rose gracefully from the hangar floor, hovering momentarily before shooting upward through the massive ceiling doors that had slid open to reveal the cloudy Erythran sky. "Cadet Vesper, you are cleared for launch. Thrusters at 20%. Ascend to holding position, then await further clearance." "Copy that." Lyra's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. The Mistral hummed to life beneath her, its gravitational dampeners creating the slight weightless sensation that preceded flight. The craft rose smoothly, hovering 10 feet above the hangar floor. Lyra guided it toward the open ceiling, her heart racing with anticipation. This was it, her first real flight outside the Academy's controlled airspace. "Vesper cleared for full ascent. Good luck, cadet." With a subtle push on the throttle, the Mistral's engines ignited with greater power. The craft shot upward, breaking free of the hangar and into the open sky. The sudden acceleration pressed Lyra back into her seat, but she welcomed the force. This was flying, real flying. The clouds parted around her as she ascended. Below, the Academy grew smaller, its imposing structure reduced to a silver speck against the rocky terrain. Above, the sky deepened from pale blue to a darker azure that promised freedom. Lyra checked her instruments. Altitude 5,000 feet and climbing steadily. All systems remained nominal. Though the strange ozone smell had intensified, she adjusted her oxygen flow, wondering if the environmental systems needed recalibration. At 10,000 feet, she felt a slight shudder run through the craft. The control panel flickered momentarily. "Control, this is Vesper," she radioed, experiencing minor power fluctuations. "Request diagnostic confirmation." Static answered her for several seconds before the controller's voice broke through. "Readings show all systems nominal. Vesper, proceed to checkpoint 1. Lyra frowned. The shuddering had stopped, but her instincts, the ones Professor Saul had just reminded her to trust, were sending warning signals. Something wasn't right. She continued her ascent more cautiously. 12,000 feet. 13,000. The first checkpoint beacon appeared on her navigation display, a floating marker stationed at 15,000 feet. Another shudder, stronger this time. The control panel lights flickered again, and for a heart-stopping moment, the engines seemed to hesitate. "Control, I'm experiencing significant power fluctuations," Lyra reported, her voice tense but controlled, requesting immediate... She never finished the sentence. With a deafening bang, the Mistral's left engine exploded. The force sent the craft into a violent spin. Alarms blaring as systems failed in rapid succession. The control panel erupted in a cascade of red warning lights. "Mayday, Mayday," Lyra shouted, fighting with the controls. "Engine failure, I'm losing altitude." Through the spinning canopy, she caught glimpses of the Academy below, growing larger as she plummeted. Training kicked in, and her hands moved automatically, trying to stabilize the craft with the remaining engine. But the Mistral resisted, caught in a death spiral that no textbook maneuver could correct. The ground rushed toward her, 10,000 feet, 8,000. The radio crackled with urgent voices, but the words were lost in the chaos of alarms and the roaring wind as the craft's hull began to breach. At 5,000 feet, Lyra made the decision. "Ejecting," she called, pulling the emergency release. Nothing happened. She pulled again, panic rising. The ejection system had failed. She was trapped in a falling coffin of metal and fire. In her final moments before impact, Lyra thought of her father. Had he faced a similar moment of terror and acceptance? She closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But the impact never came. A sudden jolt shook the craft, different from the violent spinning. Lyra's eyes snapped open. Through the cracked canopy, she glimpsed something impossible. An aerolus, far larger than any she had seen before, had positioned itself beneath the falling Mistral. Its massive wings strained against the combined weight, slowing their descent. The creature's iridescent scales shimmered with effort, a beautiful violet blue that seemed to pulse with inner light. Its eyes, intelligent, determined, met Lyra's for a brief moment before it changed position, angling them both toward a clearing in the forest below the academy. The landing was rough but controlled. The Mistral skidded across the ground, tearing through underbrush and smaller trees before coming to a halt against a massive trunk. The impact threw Lyra forward against her restraints, knocking the wind from her lungs. For several moments, she could only sit there, gasping for breath, mind struggling to process what had happened. Then, movement outside the shattered canopy caught her attention. The Aeralis had landed nearby. Up close, it was even more magnificent, at least 20 feet long from its sleek head to the tip of its tapered tail, with a wingspan twice that length. Its scales caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the forest floor. More surprisingly, the creature was approaching the craft, moving with a careful deliberation that spoke of intelligence far beyond animal instinct. It stopped beside the cockpit, those mesmerizing eyes examining Lyra with unmistakable concern. With trembling hands, Lyra managed to release her harness. The cockpit release mechanism had been damaged in the crash, but a well-placed kick at the already cracked canopy created an opening large enough to squeeze through. She tumbled to the ground, legs buckling beneath her. The Aeralis made a soft trilling sound, almost like a question. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, unsure if the creature could understand human speech. "You saved my life." The Aeralis tilted its head. Then, to Lyra's astonishment, it spoke, not in words, but in a series of melodic tones and clicks that somehow conveyed meaning directly to her mind. "Your craft was sabotaged. You were never meant to survive the trial." Lyra staggered backward, shocked both by the communication and its content. "What? How do you know that? Who are you?" The creature's wings shifted, catching the light in a way that seemed almost like a shrug. "I am Talon Eris. I have been watching the Academy. The one you call director has been eliminating threats to his power." Before Lyra could process this accusation, the sound of approaching aircraft cut through the forest canopy. Search and rescue, no doubt. The Aeralis, Talon, tensed, preparing to flee. "Wait," Lyra called. "How can I find you again?" Talon's response came as he launched skyward, powerful wings carrying him up through the trees with astonishing speed. The spirit forest, where the ancient engines sleep, 3 days from now, when the moon is high. Then he was gone, a flash of iridescence quickly lost among the clouds. Minutes later, Academy rescue craft descended into the clearing. Medical teams rushed to Lyra's side, checking for injuries while security personnel secured the crash site. In the chaos, Professor Saul pushed through, her face pale with worry. "Lyra, thank the stars you're alive. When we lost contact." She stopped, taking in the wreckage. What happened? Before Lyra could answer, Director Drace arrived, his cold gaze surveying the scene with clinical detachment. "Cadet Vesper," he said, voice devoid of the concern one might expect. "It seems your ambition exceeded your abilities today." "My engines exploded," Lyra replied, anger rising. "The ejection system failed. This wasn't pilot error." Drace raised an eyebrow. "Preliminary telemetry suggests you attempted a power surge well beyond protocol parameters. Pushing for speed, perhaps? Trying for your record on the very first trial?" "That's not what happened," Lyra insisted, but even as she spoke, she saw the doubt in the faces around her. Without proof, her word meant nothing against the Academy's data. "And how exactly did you survive the crash?" Drace continued, gaze shifting to the minimal damage to the clearing. "A mistral falling from that height should have created a much larger impact zone." Lyra hesitated. Mentioning Talon would only invite more questions she wasn't ready to answer, especially if what he had said about sabotage was true. "I managed to partially restart the second engine, enough to slow my descent." Drace's expression made it clear he didn't believe her, but he didn't press further. Instead, he turned to the gathered personnel. "Take Cadet Vesper to medical for evaluation. The rest of you, secure this site. Full investigation protocols." As medics guided her toward a transport, Lyra caught Professor Saul's eye. The older woman's expression was unreadable, but she gave a subtle nod, one that somehow conveyed both caution and reassurance. Later, lying in the sterile white room of the Academy's medical wing, Lyra replayed the day's events in her mind. The explosion, the fall, Talon's rescue, and his shocking accusation. It seemed impossible, yet doubt had taken root. Why would an Aralis lie? What would he gain? Her thoughts were interrupted by the medical bay doors sliding open. She expected another doctor, but instead, Director Drace entered, accompanied by 2 Academy security officers. "Cadet Vesper," he began without preamble, "the initial investigation has yielded concerning results. Your flight data recorder shows unauthorized modifications to the engine control systems, modifications that match your personal access signature." Lyra sat up, wincing at the pain in her bruised ribs. "That's impossible. I never—" "The evidence suggests otherwise," Drace cut her off. "Either you tampered with Academy property in a reckless attempt to break records, or you are criminally incompetent. Neither speaks well of your future here." He placed a data pad on the bed beside her. "This is an indefinite suspension notice. You are restricted from all flight activities and advanced classes pending a full inquiry. Your Academy residence will be reassigned, and you will work maintenance shifts under supervision until the board determines your fate." The words hit Lyra like physical blows. Suspension, her dream, shattered in an instant. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong." Drace's expression remained impassive. "The evidence says otherwise. Cadet, or should I say, Technician Vesper now?" He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your father would be disappointed in such recklessness. He understood the value of patience." The mention of her father ignited something in Lyra, a spark of defiance that burned through the shock. "My father would know when someone was being set up," she called after him, "and so do I." Drace didn't turn back, but his shoulders stiffened momentarily before he continued out the door, the security officers following in his wake. Alone again. Lyra clutched the suspension notice, tears of frustration threatening to fall. Everything she had worked for, gone, her reputation, ruined. Even if she could prove her innocence, the damage was done. The Academy would never look at her the same way again. The photograph of her father seemed to burn against her heart, where it still rested in her pocket. She pulled it out, tracing his smile with a trembling finger. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I failed." But as she stared at his image, something else stirred within her: determination. Her father had never accepted defeat, not even when facing the impossible, and neither would she. 3 days. Talon had said to meet him in 3 days. If anyone could help her uncover the truth, it would be the being who had saved her life, the being who claimed to know why she had nearly lost it. Lyra slipped the photograph back into her pocket and laid back on the medical bed, mind racing with plans. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, Lyra was discharged from medical with a clean bill of health, physically at least. Her psychological evaluation had been more complex, with the academy psychiatrist noting concerning obsession with perceived sabotage and inability to accept responsibility for technical failures. Word of her crash had spread throughout the academy. As she made her way to her newly assigned quarters, a small, windowless room in the maintenance section, far from the cadet dormitories, she felt the weight of stares and whispers. There she is, the Earth girl who couldn't handle a simple flight trial. I heard she tried some crazy maneuver to impress the directors. My cousin works in engineering, says her craft was tampered with, but they're covering it up. That last comment made Lyra pause momentarily. So not everyone believed the official story. She filed that information away, continuing her journey with eyes forward and shoulders back, despite the humiliation burning within. Her new quarters were exactly as expected, utilitarian and devoid of personality. A single bed, a small desk, a locker for personal items, the maintenance uniform laid out on the bed, dull gray instead of the cadet's blue, felt like a prison sentence. Lyra had just finished changing when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Professor Saul, who quickly stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "We don't have much time," the professor said, her usually composed demeanor replaced by urgent intensity. "I've been assigned to supervise your first maintenance shift, but Drace's people will be watching us." "Professor, I didn't sabotage my craft," Lyra began, but Saul raised a hand to silence her. "I know," she said simply. "The access logs were altered. Someone with high-level clearance made those modifications, then blamed you. But proving it will be nearly impossible. The evidence has been too carefully manipulated." Hope and vindication surged through Lyra. "Then you believe me? About the explosion being deliberate?" Saul's expression grew troubled. "What I believe is that you were targeted. Whether it was meant to kill you or merely discredit you, I can't say. But either way, you've made a powerful enemy in Director Drace." "But why?" Lyra asked, bewildered. "I'm just a cadet. What threat could I possibly pose?" "Perhaps it's not about who you are now, but who you could become." Saul glanced at the door, then lowered her voice further. "Your father was on the verge of a breakthrough before his accident, a new propulsion system that would have revolutionized flight on Erythra. Drace was against the project, claimed it was disrespectful to the natural order." Lyra's mind raced. "My father's accident, was it really—" "I don't know," Saul interrupted, pain flashing across her features. "I've had my suspicions for years, but no proof. Julian was my friend as well as my student. If Drace was responsible—" She shook her head. "That's a path I've been unable to confirm." A heavy silence fell between them. Lyra thought of Talon's words. "The one you call director has been eliminating threats to his power." Could her father have been one such threat? "What do I do now?" Lyra finally asked. Saul straightened, her professional demeanor returning. "For now, you play the part assigned to you. Work maintenance, keep your head down, and—" She hesitated, then reached into her pocket, extracting a small data chip. "This contains your father's research notes. I've kept them safe all these years. Perhaps they'll help you understand what he was working toward." Lyra took the chip with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. Your maintenance shift begins in 30 minutes. Report to Hangar 3. Saul moved toward the door, then paused. Be careful who you trust, Lyra, and if you happen to encounter any native assistants, be even more cautious. The Academy strictly forbids unauthorized contact with the Aralis. Before Lyra could ask how the professor knew about Talon, Saul was gone, leaving her alone with a data chip that might hold answers or create even more questions. The maintenance shift was grueling. 8 hours of basic repairs under the watchful eye of a supervisor who clearly viewed her as both incompetent and potentially dangerous. The work itself wasn't difficult. Lyra had always had a natural affinity for mechanics, but the constant scrutiny and whispered comments from other workers wore on her spirit. By the time she returned to her quarters that evening, exhaustion had settled into her bones, yet sleep eluded her. Instead, she inserted her father's data chip into her personal tablet and began reading. The notes were extensive and often technical, detailing Julian Vesper's work on what he called the Spirit Engine, a revolutionary propulsion system that somehow merged Erythran organic principles with human technology. Most of it was beyond Lyra's current understanding, but certain phrases jumped out. The Aralis achieved their remarkable speeds not through conventional aerodynamics alone, but through a spiritual energetic connection to Erythra itself. Preliminary tests suggest human consciousness can establish similar connections, though our biological limitations require technological assistance. Met with T.A. again today. His insights on the spiritual currents are invaluable, though the Academy would have my position if they knew about our collaboration. The initials sent a jolt through Lyra. Talon Eris? Had her father been working with the same Aralis who saved her? She continued reading deep into the night, absorbing her father's brilliant, unconventional ideas. He had been on the verge of something revolutionary, a propulsion system that would allow humans to fly with the same freedom and connection that the Aralis enjoyed naturally. No wonder Drace felt threatened. If humans could fly like the Aralis, his carefully maintained hierarchy, with Earthborn pilots always a step below Erythran ones, would crumble. By the time Lyra finally dozed off, dawn was approaching. Her last conscious thought was of the Spirit Forest, where Talon had told her to meet him. Tonight was the third night. Whatever answers awaited her there, she was determined to find them. The day passed in a blur of maintenance tasks and avoiding unwanted attention. Lyra kept her head down, played the role of the humbled, disgraced cadet. Inside, however, her mind was racing with plans for the evening's expedition. The Spirit Forest lay beyond the Academy's boundaries, deep in the Nimbus mountain range. Getting there would require evading security patrols and navigating treacherous terrain in the dark. But after reading her father's notes, Lyra was more determined than ever to meet Talon and learn the truth. As twilight fell, she slipped away from her quarters, using the maintenance passageways to avoid the main corridors. Her father's notes had included detailed maps of the Academy, including several unmarked exits that security rarely monitored. One such exit, a service tunnel originally designed for waste disposal, led her to a rocky outcropping half a mile from the Academy's main structure. From there, Lyra could see the Spirit Forest in the distance, a dense grove of towering trees with luminescent bark that cast an ethereal blue glow in the gathering darkness. The journey took nearly 2 hours, climbing down treacherous mountain paths and crossing a narrow ravine. By the time Lyra reached the forest's edge, the twin moons of Erythra had risen high, bathing the landscape in silver light. The forest interior was like nothing she had ever seen. The trees, some hundreds of feet tall, pulsed with internal light that shifted in color from blue to violet to a deep, resonant purple. The ground was carpeted with phosphorescent moss that reacted to her footsteps, leaving trails of brighter light in her wake. "Talon," she called softly, unsure where exactly they were meant to meet. "Are you here?" No response came, but a gentle breeze stirred the leaves above, creating a symphony of rustling sounds that almost seemed to form words. Lyra pressed deeper into the forest, guided by instinct more than reason. After walking for what felt like hours, she emerged into a clearing unlike any other. At its center stood what appeared to be ruins, not of buildings, but of machines. Massive, curved structures of metal and crystal rose from the forest floor, partially overgrown with the luminescent vegetation, but still recognizable as technological in origin. And there, perched atop the largest structure, was Talon. In the moonlight and the forest's glow, the Aralis looked even more majestic than Lyra remembered. His scales shimmered with internal light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the forest around him. "You came." His thought voice resonated in her mind, a mixture of surprise and approval. Few humans would brave the spirit forest at night. "You saved my life," Lyra replied simply, "and you offered answers. I need to know why my craft was sabotaged, and if it's connected to my father's death." Talon descended from his perch, wings creating gentle currents that stirred the glowing moss below. He landed before her, folding his massive wings against his serpentine body. "Your father," he began, a note of reverence in his mental voice. "Julian Vesper was a visionary among your kind. He understood what few humans do, that flight is not merely a mechanical process, but a spiritual one." "You knew him," Lyra breathed. "Your the one in his notes." Talon's head dipped in acknowledgement. "I helped him understand our ways. In return, he helped me understand yours. Together, we sought to bridge the divide between our peoples through the universal language of flight." He moved toward one of the ruined structures, beckoning Lyra to follow. "These are not ruins, but dormant. The ancient engines, what your father called spirit engines, created by my ancestors when they first learned to enhance their natural flight abilities." As they approached, Lyra saw that what she had taken for decay was actually intricate design. Organic curves melded with crystalline structures in ways that defied conventional engineering. The entire construct hummed with subtle energy, responding to Talon's presence. "Our ancestors discovered that by synchronizing their heartbeats with Erythra's natural rhythms, they could achieve speeds and maneuverability beyond physical limitations," Talon explained. "These engines were catalysts for that synchronization, amplifying the connection. And my father believed humans could do the same," Lyra concluded, remembering his notes. "That's what he was working on before he died." "Yes, and he was succeeding." Talon's mental voice darkened, which made him dangerous to those who believe humans should remain limited. "Drace?" Lyra whispered. "Director Harkon Drace believes in natural order, with Erythrans at the top, earthborn humans beneath them, and my kind as mere curiosities to be studied from afar." Talon's wings shifted restlessly. The idea that an earthborn human might achieve what even native Erythrans cannot, true communion with our skies, was intolerable to him. "So he sabotaged my father's craft," Lyra said, the pieces finally fitting together. "And when I started showing the same potential, he tried to eliminate me too." "Your father's notes mentioned you often," Talon said, gentler now. "He believed you possessed a natural affinity for the spiritual aspects of flight, an intuitive understanding that couldn't be taught. When you announced your intention to break the Sky God's record, Drace recognized the same threat reborn." Lyra leaned against one of the ancient structures, overwhelmed by the implications. "But what can I do now? I've been suspended. My access to aircraft has been revoked. Even if I wanted to continue my father's work, I don't have the resources." Talon's eyes gleamed with something like mischief. "Perhaps not at the Academy, but here," he gestured to the ancient engines around them. "Here we have everything we need to prove Drace wrong, and honor your father's legacy. You want to build a spirit engine? Lyra asked, incredulous. We want to finish what Julian started, came a new voice from the edge of the clearing. Lyra whirled around to find Professor Saul emerging from the trees, a pack slung over her shoulder and determination etched on her face. Professor? Lyra gasped. How did you— Find you? I've known about this place for years. Saul approached, nodding respectfully to Talon. Julian brought me here once, though I've never returned until tonight. Too many painful memories. She set down her pack and began unpacking equipment, tools, components, and what appeared to be technical schematics. I've been continuing Julian's work in secret, small steps, nothing that would draw attention. But with you here now, and with Talon's help, we might actually succeed where your father left off. But why risk your position at the Academy? Lyra asked. Drace would never forgive this kind of collaboration. Saul's expression hardened. Because Drace has corrupted everything the Academy was meant to stand for. We came to Erythra to learn and grow alongside its people, all its people. Instead, he's turned it into a monument to human exceptionalism, while simultaneously ensuring Earthborn humans remain second-class citizens. She spread the schematics across a flat section of the ancient engine. Lyra recognized her father's handwriting alongside technical drawings of what appeared to be a hybrid propulsion system, part mechanical, part crystalline, with organic elements integrated throughout. The spirit engine works by creating a resonance field between pilot and craft, Saul explained, pointing to various components. The crystals amplify natural bioelectrical impulses, essentially your heartbeat and brain activity, and translate them into propulsion energy. But the key, Talon interjected, is the spiritual connection. Without that, it's merely an exotic power source. The true potential is unlocked when pilot and craft become a single entity, moving with one purpose, one heartbeat. Lyra studied the schematics, her engineer's mind already identifying modifications and improvements. This could work, she murmured, excitement building. But we'd need a craft to install it in, and I don't exactly have access to the Academy hangars anymore. Saul and Talon exchanged a meaningful look. Actually, the professor said, that's being arranged. Your Mistral X-09 wasn't completely destroyed in the crash. The Academy salvaged it for parts, but declared the mainframe unsalvageable. It currently resides in Hangar 12's scrap section, Talon added, where, coincidentally, the security systems will experience a brief malfunction tomorrow night. Lyra looked between them, realization dawning. You're not just planning to build an engine, you want me to fly again. To challenge the Sky God's record. Not just challenge it, Saul said, her voice soft but intense. Break it, publicly, irrefutably. Show the entire Academy, the entire planet, what your father always believed, that true flight transcends species and origin. It won't be easy, Talon warned. The connection required for the spirit engine demands complete trust and openness. Few humans have achieved it, even briefly. And Drace will do everything in his power to stop you, Saul added. Once he realizes what we're planning, he'll use every resource at his disposal to prevent your success. Lyra should have felt overwhelmed, should have recognized the impossibility of what they were proposing. Instead, a sense of rightness settled over her, as if she had been moving toward this moment her entire life. When do we start? She asked. The answer came in synchronized smiles, one human, one Aralis. Now, they said together. The following weeks passed in a blur of clandestine activity. By day, Lyra performed her maintenance duties, head down, playing the role of the humbled cadet. By night, she slipped away to the spirit forest, where Saul and Talon awaited with the slowly evolving spirit engine. Retrieving the damaged Mistral had been the first challenge. As promised, a glitch in the security systems had created a 15-minute window during which Lyra and Saul, disguised as waste disposal technicians, had moved the craft onto a transport sled and away from the academy. Getting it to the spirit forest had required Talon's help. The Aralis, with his incredible strength, had carried the disassembled frame piece by piece through the mountains, reassembling it in a hidden cavern adjacent to the clearing with the ancient engines. Now, 3 weeks later, the Mistral was nearly unrecognizable. Its sleek lines remained, but the conventional propulsion system had been replaced by something far more exotic. Crystalline structures lined the interior, pulsing with gentle light that responded to proximity. The control interfaces had been simplified, many replaced by direct neural links that would connect to a specialized flight helmet. "The principle is elegant," Sol explained as they worked on the final calibrations. "Your heartbeat, your thoughts, your very essence becomes the fuel. The stronger the connection, the more powerful the response. It's how the Aralis fly naturally," Talon added, carefully adjusting a crystal array. "Our bodies evolved to channel Erythra's energies. This engine artificially creates the same connection for humans." Lyra ran her hand along the modified cockpit, feeling a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate with her touch. "And this is what my father was working on when he died." "Yes," Sol confirmed, her expression somber. "He had progressed further than I realized. The notes you've been studying were only part of his research. He kept the most revolutionary aspects hidden, fearing exactly what eventually happened." "But how will this help us prove Drace was behind the sabotage?" Lyra asked, the question that had been bothering her for days finally surfacing. "Even if I break the record, it doesn't expose his crimes." Saul and Talon exchanged a look that Lyra had come to recognize. They were keeping something from her. "What aren't you telling me?" she demanded. After a moment's hesitation, Saul reached into her pack and withdrew a small device. "This is a quantum recorder. It captures and stores quantum states rather than conventional data. Undetectable, untraceable." "Your father invented it," Talon added, "a side project from his main research. I've been using it to document Drace's activities," Sol continued. "Conversations, access logs, communications with his inner circle. I have evidence suggesting he ordered the sabotage of your craft, though nothing definitive enough for legal action." "But," Talon interjected, "we believe he will reveal himself more directly when threatened. If you publicly announce your intention to attempt the Sky God's record." "He'll panic," Lyra finished, understanding dawning. "Try to stop me by any means necessary." "And we'll be recording every move," Sol confirmed. "But for this to work, you need to master the spirit engine first. You need to be capable of actually breaking that record when the time comes." Lyra nodded, determination settling over her. "Then let's focus on that. How do I forge this connection you keep talking about?" Talon moved closer, his massive form somehow graceful in the confined space of the cavern. "It begins with synchronization. Your heartbeat must find harmony with the engine's core frequency." He placed a talon gently against Lyra's chest, above her heart. "Listen to your own rhythm first. Then listen to the engine's. When you can hear both as one song, the connection begins." Training with the spirit engine proved more challenging than any simulator or flight exercise Lyra had ever attempted. It wasn't about skill or knowledge. It was about surrendering control while simultaneously maintaining perfect focus. A paradox that her logical mind struggled to reconcile. Day after day, she sat in the modified Mistral's cockpit, the neural interface helmet sending tingling sensations across her scalp as she attempted to synchronize with the engine, and day after day, she failed. "I don't understand," she admitted after a particularly frustrating session. "I can feel something happening, but it's like hitting a wall. The engine responds, but then everything just stops." "Fear," Talon said simply. "You're holding back, part of you refuses to fully connect. I'm not afraid, Lyra protested, though even as she spoke, she recognized the lie. The memory of falling from the sky, of the explosion that had nearly claimed her life, still haunted her dreams. Not just fear of flying, Soul said gently. Fear of what happens if you succeed. If you truly master this engine, you'll be changing everything for yourself, for humanity on Erythra, for relations with the Aralis. That's a tremendous responsibility. Lyra removed the neural helmet, running a hand through her sweat-dampened hair. My father believed it was worth the risk. And what do you believe? Talon asked, his mental voice probing yet gentle. The question hung in the air as Lyra considered her answer. What did she truly want? Was this about vindicating her father, exposing Drace, breaking records, or something deeper, the pure freedom of flight that had called to her since childhood? I believe, she finally said, that the sky belongs to everyone willing to respect its power, not just humans or Aralis, but anyone with the courage to reach for it. She looked between her two mentors, and I believe my father was right. True flight is about connection, not domination. Something shifted in the atmosphere of the cavern. The crystals in the spirit engine pulsed brighter, responding to her words, or perhaps to the conviction behind them. Try again, Talon urged, but this time don't think about controlling the engine. Think about joining with it. Lyra replaced the neural helmet and closed her eyes. Instead of focusing on the technical aspects, the energy flows, the control interfaces, she simply listened. To her heartbeat, to the subtle hum of the crystals, to the whisper of air circulating through the cavern. Gradually, these separate sounds began to merge in her perception. Her heartbeat aligned with the engine's pulse. The boundary between her body and the craft blurred. When she opened her eyes, the cockpit was suffused with a soft violet glow, the same color as Talon's scales when he had saved her from the crash. I can feel it, she whispered in awe. The Mistral's systems responded to her thought before she even touched the controls, power levels rising and falling with her breathing. That, Soul said with quiet pride, is what Julian was working toward, not just a new engine, but a new relationship between pilot and craft. It's beautiful, Lyra murmured as the connection deepened. Through the engine, she could sense the forest around them, the currents of energy flowing through Erythra itself. It was like seeing a hidden dimension that had always existed alongside the physical world. The moment was shattered by an urgent beeping from Saul's communication device. The professor checked it, her expression immediately darkening. What is it? Lyra asked, the connection to the engine fading as her concentration broke. Drace has accelerated his plans, Soul replied grimly. He's announced a special flight demonstration for Academy officials and government representatives 3 days from now. What kind of demonstration? Talon asked, moving closer. Saul's eyes met Lyra's. He's unveiling a new autonomous craft called the Sky Reaver, designed, he claims, to break the Sky God's record using purely mechanical means, no pilot required. The implications were clear. If Drace succeeded, he would not only secure his position and ideology, but he would render their entire project meaningless. A machine breaking the record would reinforce the idea that technology alone was the path forward, not the spiritual connection Lyra's father had championed. We're not ready, Lyra said, anxiety rising. I've barely established the connection, let alone mastered it enough for a record attempt. We don't have a choice, Soul replied. It's now or never. The demonstration will be held in the upper atmosphere, near the electric storm of Nimbus, the very conditions of the original record. Talon's wings rustled thoughtfully. It's actually ideal, he said after a moment. All the officials will be watching. If Lyra appears then, challenges the Sky Reaver directly. Drace will have no choice but to accept or lose face, Sol finished. And with everyone watching, he won't be able to sabotage her openly. But he'll try something, Lyra said with certainty, and I'm still not ready. Talon moved to her side, his massive head lowering to meet her gaze directly. Then we have 3 days to get you ready. No more gradual progress, no more safety measures. Total immersion in the connection. Is that even possible? Sol asked, concern evident. Possible, yes. Dangerous, also, yes. Talon's mental voice was grave. The full connection risks losing yourself in the engine's consciousness. The ancient records speak of pilots who became one with their craft so completely that they could never return to their separate existence. Lyra should have been terrified by this warning. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. My father would have taken that risk, she said quietly. For the truth, for the future. She looked between Sol and Talon, her decision made. Teach me everything, whatever it takes. The next 3 days tested Lyra's physical and mental limits beyond anything she had experienced before. Talon guided her through Aralis meditation techniques designed to prepare young flyers for their first spiritual flights. Sol modified the neural interface to allow deeper connection while implementing emergency cutoffs if Lyra's vital signs indicated dangerous levels of integration. Hour after hour, Lyra sat in the cockpit, pushing deeper into the connection with the spirit engine. Each session lasted longer, went further, until she began to understand what Talon had meant about losing herself. The boundary between Lyra Vesper and the Mistral X-09 became increasingly theoretical, a suggestion rather than a definite line. Yet somehow, she maintained her core identity even as she expanded her consciousness to encompass the craft. Perhaps it was her father's memory anchoring her, or perhaps it was sheer stubbornness. Whatever the reason, Lyra learned to dance along the edge of total integration without falling into the abyss. By the dawn of the 3rd day, she was ready for a true test flight. They moved the Mistral from the cavern to a concealed clearing deep in the spirit forest. There, with Sol monitoring from the ground and Talon circling overhead, Lyra prepared for her first flight with the spirit engine. The pre-flight check was unlike any she had performed before. Instead of systematically reviewing systems, she simply opened her awareness, feeling the craft as an extension of herself. Every component, every connection, registered in her consciousness as clearly as her own limbs. Remember, Talon's mental voice reached her. The engine responds to intention more than thought. Don't try to calculate your movements. Feel them. Lyra acknowledged with a thought that translated into a brief pulse of the Mistral's external lights. Then, with a deep breath, she engaged the spirit engine. The response was immediate and exhilarating. The craft rose from the clearing with fluid grace, hovering momentarily before shooting upward with acceleration that should have been physically impossible. Yet the gravitational forces Lyra expected never materialized. The spirit engine somehow compensated, creating a pocket of altered space-time around the Mistral, above the forest canopy. Lyra allowed herself to truly experience the connection for the first time. The Mistral responded to her slightest impulse, banking, rolling, and diving with precision that no conventional controls could match. It was like dancing with gravity itself, each movement flowing into the next with organic perfection. Talon kept pace beside her, his wings working powerfully as they climbed higher into Erythra's atmosphere. Through their mental link, Lyra could sense his approval and his concern. "You're doing well." His thoughts reached her. "But remember, this is only preparation. The real test will come tomorrow, against the Sky Reaver and within the electric storm." Lyra acknowledged the warning, but couldn't suppress the pure joy flooding through her. This was what flying was meant to be, not a battle against natural forces, but a harmony with them. For the first time, she understood what had driven her father's research. This wasn't about breaking records or proving points. It was about experiencing the sky as it was meant to be experienced. After 2 hours of increasingly complex maneuvers, Saul's voice came through the communication system, breaking into Lyra's reverie. "Time to return, Lyra. We need to conserve energy for tomorrow, and we can't risk being spotted by Academy patrols." Reluctantly, Lyra guided the Mistral back toward the clearing. The descent was as smooth as the ascent had been, the craft settling onto the forest floor with barely a whisper of disturbed air. As the engine powered down, Lyra felt the connection gradually fade, like waking from a vivid dream. When she finally removed the neural helmet, the world seemed strangely muted, her own body oddly limited. "That was," she began, struggling to find words for the experience. "I know," Sol said with a gentle smile, helping her from the cockpit. "Your father described it the same way, like returning to a cage after experiencing true freedom." Talon landed nearby, folding his wings. "You've mastered the basic connection faster than any human I've encountered," he acknowledged. "But tomorrow will demand more. The electric storm interferes with the spiritual energies, creating turbulence in both the physical and metaphysical realms. Not to mention whatever surprises Drace has planned for his demonstration," Sol added grimly. "The Sky Reaver is unlike any craft in the Academy's known inventory. We have to assume it's been designed specifically to counter anything that might challenge it." Lyra nodded, the euphoria of flight giving way to the reality of their situation. "So what's our strategy?" Sol withdrew a small device from her pocket, the quantum recorder. "I'll be in the observation deck with the other faculty members, recording everything. Your appearance alone will throw Drace off balance, but we need him to react in a way that reveals his true nature. Which means I need to be a genuine threat to his demonstration," Lyra concluded. "Not just show up, but actually challenge the Sky Reaver and win." "Yes," Talon confirmed. "And to do that, you'll need to push the spirit engine beyond what we've tested today. You'll need to achieve what the ancient Aerolus called heart binding, a complete synchronization between your vital rhythms and the engine's core frequency." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Lyra asked. Talon's expression grew solemn. "It means I must share my heartbeat with you and the engine, a three-way connection that amplifies the spiritual energies beyond what either of us could achieve alone." "Is that even possible?" Sol asked, surprised. "Cross-species heart binding?" "Theoretically," Talon replied. "Your Julian believed it was. His final notes described the process, though he never had the opportunity to attempt it." Lyra's heart raced at the implication. "So tomorrow, we're not just challenging Drace and his Sky Reaver, we're attempting something that's never been done before, a human and an Auralis, linked through a spirit engine." "Yes," Talon said simply, "and if we succeed, we change everything." The weight of the moment settled over them, the culmination of years of research, sacrifice, and hope. If they failed, Drace's vision for Erythra would prevail. Humans and Auralis forever separated, the spiritual connection to flight forgotten in favor of cold technology. If they succeeded, the possibilities were endless. "Get some rest," Sol advised, checking her timepiece. "Tomorrow's demonstration begins at noon. We'll need to position the Mistral in the cloud cover above the observation platform by 11 at the latest." As they secured the craft and prepared to return to their respective locations for the night, Lyra found herself lingering beside the Mistral. In the fading light of day, its modified form seemed to pulse with anticipation, the crystalline components catching the last rays of Erythra's sun. "We can do this," she whispered, placing a hand on the cool metal surface. "For my father, for Talon's people, for everyone who believes the sky belongs to all of us." The craft hummed beneath her touch, as if in agreement. Dawn broke over the Nimbus Mountains with unusual clarity. The perpetual cloud cover that gave the range its name had temporarily dissipated, revealing the jagged peaks in all their majesty. Above them, the electric storm, a permanent atmospheric phenomenon that circled the planet's upper stratosphere, flickered with vibrant energy, its lightning arcs visible even in daylight. Lyra had barely slept, her mind racing with preparations and possibilities. She arrived at the spirit forest before sunrise, finding Talon already there, meditating beside the Mistral. "The conditions are perfect," he greeted her, eyes opening as she approached. "The storm is particularly active today. The ancient records say such days are when the veil between physical and spiritual is thinnest." "Let's hope that works in our favor," Lyra replied, running a pre-flight check on the Mistral. The craft responded to her proximity, systems activating without physical input, their connection already establishing itself even without the neural interface. Saul arrived shortly after, bringing news from the Academy. "Drace has gathered quite an audience," she reported. "Government officials, corporate sponsors, even representatives from Earth. He's presenting the Sky Reaver as the future of interplanetary travel. No human limitations to consider." "Have you seen the craft itself?" Lyra asked, securing supplies in the Mistral's small storage compartment. "Only glimpses. It's unsettling. More predator than vehicle. Drace has apparently incorporated Aralis biomechanics into the design, but without the spiritual components, pure efficiency." Talon's wings rustled with disapproval, taking the form without the essence, typical of Drace's philosophy. "The demonstration is scheduled to begin with the Sky Reaver launching from the Academy's main platform," Sol continued. "It will ascend to the electric storm, navigate a predetermined course through the lightning fields, then return. If successful, it will have broken the Sky God's record by a significant margin." "And that's when I appear," Lyra confirmed. "Yes, challenge it to a direct competition. Drace won't be able to refuse without losing face in front of his distinguished guests." Saul handed Lyra a small communicator. "I'll be monitoring from the observation deck. Once the Sky Reaver launches, I'll signal you." The final preparations passed in focused silence. Lyra donned her flight suit, not the Academy uniform, but one Saul had modified with integrated biometric sensors that would help maintain the heart-binding Talon had described. The neural interface helmet, too, had been enhanced, its crystalline components now extending to cover more of Lyra's neural pathways. "Remember," Talon said as Lyra climbed into the cockpit, "the heart-binding will feel overwhelming at first. My consciousness will touch yours through the engine. Don't resist it, but don't surrender to it either. Find the harmony between our rhythms." Lyra nodded, settling into the seat that had become a second home over the past weeks. "And if Drace tries something? If the Sky Reaver is more than it appears?" "Trust the connection," Talon replied simply. "The spirit engine will respond to genuine need more powerfully than any programmed attack." Saul approached for a final check of the systems. "Julian would be so proud," she said softly, adjusting a connection on the neural interface. "Not just of what you're attempting, but of why you're doing it." Emotion threatened to overwhelm Lyra at the mention of her father. "I wish he could see this." "Perhaps he can," Talon suggested. "The ancient Aralis believed that those who truly loved the sky never truly leave it. Their essence becomes part of the spiritual currents we tap into during flight." It was a comforting thought that somehow her father's spirit might witness her flight today. Lyra tucked his photograph into a small compartment beside the control panel, his smile visible through the transparent cover. "It's time," Sol announced, checking her timepiece. "I need to return to the Academy before my absence is noticed. The demonstration begins in 2 hours." With final embraces and wishes of good fortune, Sol departed for the Academy, Talon remained, preparing for his own role in the coming challenge. Unlike Lyra, he would not be physically present in the craft. Instead, he would fly alongside, maintaining the heart binding through proximity and focused intent. The wait was excruciating. Lyra used the time to meditate as Talon had taught her, aligning her breathing with the subtle pulse of the spirit engine. Through the Mistral sensors, she monitored communications from the Academy, tracking the increasing activity as Drace's demonstration approached. Finally, Sol's signal came through, a simple tone that indicated the Sky Reaver was preparing for launch. "It's time," Lyra said, securing the neural interface helmet and initiating the spirit engine's primary sequence. The Mistral rose from the spirit forest with preternatural grace, accelerating into the cloud cover that would conceal their approach. Talon flew beside her, his massive wings carrying him effortlessly through the thinning atmosphere. As they ascended, Lyra established the preliminary connection with the engine. The familiar sensation of expanded awareness enveloped her, the craft becoming an extension of her consciousness. But today, she would need to go further, into the heart-binding Talon had described. "I am ready when you are." Talon's mental voice reached her, stronger now as they approached the upper atmosphere where the electric storm churned. Lyra took a deep breath and opened her mind fully to the connection. Immediately, she felt Talon's presence, not just his thoughts, but his very essence. His heartbeat, powerful and steady, resonated through the spirit engine's crystalline matrix, creating harmonics with her own. The sensation was indescribable. It was intimacy beyond anything physical, a sharing of self that transcended species differences. Through Talon's perception, Lyra experienced Erythra in ways human senses could never capture. The spiritual currents that flowed between sky and land, the ancient rhythms that had guided Eralis' flight for millennia. In return, Talon experienced human consciousness, the analytical precision, the emotional depth, the unique perspective of a being both connected to and separate from the natural world. The spirit engine responded to this melding, its energy output doubling, then tripling as the heart binding stabilized. The Mistral's speed increased beyond anything Lyra had experienced in their test flights, yet remained perfectly controlled. "We are approaching the demonstration zone." Talon's thoughts came, now so integrated with Lyra's that they seemed like her own reflections. "I can see the Sky Reaver launching." Through their shared perception, Lyra witnessed Drace's creation for the first time. The Sky Reaver was a study in lethal elegance, sleek, predatory lines reminiscent of an Eralis, but rendered in black metal that absorbed rather than reflected light. It moved with uncanny precision, its automated systems calculating every variable as it rose toward the electric storm. Below, on the Academy's observation platform, the assembled dignitaries watched through magnification devices. At the center stood Director Drace, his expression a mask of smug confidence as he narrated the Sky Reaver's capabilities to his impressed audience. "Now," Talon urged, while all eyes are on the Sky Reaver. Lyra guided the Mistral out of the cloud cover, the heart binding giving her such perfect control that the transition appeared like a veil being lifted. One moment, clear sky; the next, the modified craft hovering in full view of the observation platform. Through the Mistral's enhanced communication system, Lyra broadcast her challenge. "Director Drace, your machine is impressive, but true flight isn't about algorithms and automated systems. It's about connection to the craft, to the sky, to Erythra itself." She could see the shock ripple through the crowd below. Drace's face contorted with rage and disbelief as he recognized both Lyra and the modified Mistral. "Vesper," his voice came through the communication channel, tight with barely controlled fury. "You were suspended. That craft was decommissioned." "Yet here we are," Lyra replied, the Mistral performing a graceful arc that brought it alongside the hovering Sky Reaver. Your machine against a true pilot, technology against spirit. Let's see which approach breaks the Sky God's record. Drace's hesitation was brief but noticeable. Refusing the challenge would raise questions among his guests, questions about his confidence in the Sky Reaver's capabilities, but accepting meant legitimizing Lyra's presence and her modified craft. "Very well," he finally responded, voice cold with suppressed rage. "Since you're so eager to embarrass yourself further, Vesper, the course is through the electric storm, following the traditional path of the Sky God's record. First to complete it and return wins." "Agreed," Lyra acknowledged, positioning the Mistral beside the Sky Reaver at the unofficial starting position, the edge of the electric storm where the lightning fields began. Through the heart binding, Talon communicated the traditional route, a treacherous path that weaved through the most active sections of the storm, requiring not just speed but intuitive understanding of the atmospheric currents. "He will have programmed the Sky Reaver with every known variable," Talon warned, "but the storm is partially spiritual in nature. Some aspects cannot be calculated, only felt." Lyra acknowledged this advantage, deepening the connection further as Drace's voice counted down from the observation platform. "Begin." The Sky Reaver launched forward with explosive acceleration, its engines generating force that would have crushed a human pilot. The Mistral, guided by the heart binding, moved differently, not fighting against the atmosphere but flowing with it, finding paths of least resistance that no computer could calculate. The electric storm enveloped them both, massive arcs of energy creating a labyrinth of deadly beauty. The Sky Reaver navigated with mechanical precision, its sensors detecting the lightning milliseconds before it struck, adjusting its course accordingly. The Mistral, however, moved with prescient grace. Through Talon's connection to the spiritual currents, Lyra could sense the lightning before it formed, understanding the patterns on an intuitive level that transcended mere prediction. Feel the rhythm. Talon guided as they navigated deeper into the storm. The lightning is not random. It follows the heartbeat of Erythra itself. Lyra surrendered more completely to the heart binding, allowing her consciousness to expand until she could indeed perceive the underlying pattern. The Mistral responded by accelerating further, finding pathways through the storm that seemed to open specifically for their passage. The Sky Reaver maintained its lead through the first third of the course, its raw power compensating for its less elegant approach. But as they reached the densest section of the storm, the area locals called the Heart of Thunder, the limitations of pure technology became apparent. Here, the lightning formed and struck so rapidly that even the Sky Reaver's advanced sensors struggled to keep pace. Its movements became more erratic, forced into defensive maneuvers rather than maintaining its optimum course. The Mistral, guided by the heart binding, flowed through this chaos like water through stones. Where the Sky Reaver fought against the storm, Lyra and Talon's combined consciousness embraced it, becoming part of its rhythm. Through their shared perception, Lyra sensed something unexpected, a presence within the storm itself, watching their progress. It felt ancient and aware, resonating with the same frequency as the spirit engine. The Sky God. Talon's thought came, tinged with reverence. Not a single Aralis, as the legends claim, but the collective consciousness of all who have truly flown these skies. As if in response to this recognition, the storm's patterns shifted subtly, not becoming easier, but more harmonious. The lightning still struck with deadly force, but now its rhythm aligned even more perfectly with the heart binding. The Mistral surged forward, overtaking the increasingly erratic Sky Reaver as they reached the midpoint of the course. Through the communication system, Lyra could hear Drace's frantic orders to his technical team, demanding more power, more speed from his creation. The Sky Reaver responded with a burst of acceleration that seemed to defy physics, briefly reclaiming the lead, but the strain on its systems was evident, components glowing with dangerous heat, energy signatures fluctuating wildly. "He's overriding the safety protocols," Talon warned. "The craft cannot sustain that output." Indeed, as they rounded the final turn in the storm course, the Sky Reaver began to show signs of imminent failure. Sparks erupted from its engine housing, its perfect lines now marred by stress fractures, as forces beyond its design parameters tore at its structure. Yet it maintained its lead, pushing toward the edge of the storm and the final stretch back to the Academy. Drace would accept nothing less than victory, even at the cost of his prized creation. Lyra faced a decision. She could push the Spirit Engine to its limits, potentially overtaking the failing Sky Reaver before the finish. But the heart binding was already taxing her and Talon's endurance. Pushing further risked losing the connection entirely, or worse, becoming so deeply merged that separation might prove impossible. As she hesitated, her father's words came back to her, not from his notes or recorded messages, but from childhood memories nearly forgotten. Flying isn't about being the fastest or reaching the highest. It's about finding your truth in the sky. In that moment, Lyra understood. This race wasn't about beating Drace or even clearing her name. It was about demonstrating a different way forward, one where humans and Aralis could share the sky as equals, each bringing their unique gifts to the partnership. Instead of pushing for more speed, Lyra deepened the heart binding in a different way. Rather than drawing more power, she sought greater harmony with Talon, with the Spirit Engine, with the storm itself. The response was immediate and unexpected. The Mistral didn't accelerate so much as transcend, the boundaries between craft and environment blurring until movement became something other than mere physical displacement. The storm parted not in fear but in recognition, lightning arcing around them in patterns that seemed almost celebratory. They passed the struggling Sky Reaver as if it were standing still, emerging from the electric storm in a burst of radiance that momentarily outshone Erythra's sun. Those watching from the Academy observation deck would later describe it as a comet breaking free from celestial constraints, trailing light that lingered in the atmosphere for hours afterward. The Mistral crossed the finish line a full 30 seconds before the Sky Reaver limped across, trailing smoke and sparks. The ancient record, which had stood for a century, hadn't merely been broken, it had been shattered by a margin that defied explanation by conventional physics. As Lyra guided the Mistral toward the Academy landing platform, the heart binding gradually eased, Talon's presence gently withdrawing to allow her full autonomy for the final approach. The separation was bittersweet, like waking from the most vivid dream, knowing it could never be fully described to another. "We have done what your father believed possible." Talon's thoughts came, fainter now but still clear. 2 species, 1 sky. The Mistral settled onto the landing platform with ethereal grace, systems powering down as Lyra removed the neural interface helmet. Through the cockpit canopy, she could see the stunned faces of the assembled dignitaries and Drace's expression of pure hatred as he realized the implications of what had just occurred. Behind him, the Sky Reaver made a much less elegant landing, parts of its outer shell falling away to reveal damaged components beneath. Its failure was as complete as the Mistral's success. Lyra opened the cockpit and emerged, standing tall despite the exhaustion that followed the heart binding. Talon circled once overhead, visible to all, before landing beside the Mistral in a clear statement of alliance. The silence that greeted this unprecedented sight was broken by a single person beginning to applaud, Professor Saul, her eyes shining with unshed tears of vindication and pride. Others joined hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm as they recognized the historic significance of what they had witnessed. Director Drace pushed through the crowd, face contorted with rage. "This is a violation of every Academy protocol," he shouted. "Unauthorized craft modifications, collaboration with non-human entities, theft of Academy property." "And yet," Lyra replied calmly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent platform, "we just demonstrated what my father tried to tell you years ago, that the future of flight lies not in dominating the sky, but in becoming one with it." "Your father was a traitor to human advancement," Drace spat, "as are you. This abomination you've created undermines everything the Academy stands for." "Does it?" came a new voice, one of the Earth representatives, a distinguished woman whose insignia marked her as a member of the Interplanetary Council. "From what I just witnessed, it represents exactly what the Academy was founded to achieve, pushing the boundaries of what's possible through understanding, not conquest." She approached the Mistral, examining its modified form with obvious interest. "Director Drace has been promising breakthroughs for years, yet all he's delivered are incremental improvements to existing technology. This," she gestured to the spirit engine's visible components, "this is genuine innovation." Other officials murmured in agreement, moving closer to inspect the craft that had so thoroughly outperformed Drace's prized creation. The director's face paled as he realized control of the narrative was slipping away. "You don't understand," he insisted. "This technology is unstable, dangerous. It blurs the line between human and machine, between us and them." He pointed accusingly at Talon, who regarded him with calm dignity. "Perhaps that line needed blurring," the councilwoman replied. "We came to Erythra not to conquer it, but to learn from it. Somewhere along the way, that mission was forgotten." Professor Saul stepped forward, the quantum recorder visible in her hand. "It was more than forgotten, councilwoman. It was deliberately subverted." She turned to face Drace directly. "We have evidence that Director Drace has systematically suppressed collaborative research, sabotaged promising projects, and most seriously, directly caused the deaths of those who threatened his vision of human supremacy." Drace's expression shifted from anger to alarm. "That's absurd. You have no proof." "Actually," Sol interrupted, "we have your own words, Director, recorded over months of surveillance, including your orders regarding Cadet Vesper's initial flight trial." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. Security personnel, responding to the councilwoman's subtle signal, moved to flank Drace, whose bluster was rapidly giving way to panic. "This is a conspiracy," he protested, eyes darting for escape routes. "These people have manipulated evidence to discredit me because they resent proper authority." His desperate monologue was cut short as Saul activated the quantum recorder, projecting its contents for all to see. Drace's own voice filled the platform, coldly ordering the sabotage of Lyra's craft, discussing how accidents could be arranged for problematic individuals, including a chilling reference to handling Vesper Sr. the same way. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. As security personnel moved to detain him, Drace made a desperate lunge toward the damaged Sky Reaver, perhaps hoping to escape in the confusion. Instead, the craft's destabilized systems chose that moment to fail completely, erupting in a shower of sparks and smoke that engulfed the platform. When the smoke cleared, Drace was being restrained, his pristine uniform now tattered. His authority evaporated in the face of irrefutable evidence. The councilwoman ordered him removed from the premises, promising a full investigation into all his activities as director. In the aftermath, Lyra found herself surrounded by officials eager to learn more about the spirit engine and the heart-binding technique. But exhaustion from the intense connection was taking its toll. She swayed slightly, steadying herself against the Mistral's hull. "I think," Professor Saul interjected, moving protectively to Lyra's side, That detailed explanations can wait. Cadet Vesper, or should I say Pilot Vesper, has accomplished something extraordinary today. She deserves rest and recognition, not interrogation. The councilwoman nodded in agreement. Indeed, there will be time for technical discussions later. For now, let us simply acknowledge what we've witnessed, the beginning of a new era in human-errorless relations, and a revolution in our understanding of flight itself. As the crowd dispersed, Saul guided Lyra to a quieter section of the platform where Talon waited, his massive form drawing curious but no longer fearful glances from passing Academy personnel. "We did it," Lyra said softly, the reality of their accomplishment finally sinking in. "We actually did it." "Your father would be proud," Saul replied, emotion making her voice rough. "Not just of the flight, but of what it represents, the bridge he always hoped to build." Talon's mental voice reached them both, his presence in Lyra's mind a gentler echo of the heart-binding they had shared. "This is only the beginning. There is much more to discover, much more to share between our peoples." In the days that followed, Erythra's society experienced the first tremors of fundamental change. The Academy, under interim leadership, began revising its policies regarding human-errorless collaboration. The Spirit Engine project was granted official recognition and funding, with Lyra and Talon named as joint research directors and Professor Saul as chief technical advisor. More significantly, other Eralis began emerging from their traditional seclusion, approaching the Academy with offers of knowledge exchange. The heart-binding technique, once considered impossible across species lines, became the subject of intense study by both human and Eralis scholars. 1 week after the historic flight, a ceremony was held on the Academy's main concourse. Lyra, still adjusting to her newfound celebrity, stood uncomfortable but proud as the councilwoman presented her with a special commendation for extraordinary achievement in aeronautical advancement, and for exemplifying the true spirit of exploration that brought humanity to Erythra. The citation read, "Pilot Lyra Vesper has not only broken records, but broken barriers between peoples." As applause echoed across the concourse, the councilwoman leaned closer to speak privately. "We would like to offer you a leadership position in the Academy's restructured administration. With Drace gone, we need people with your vision to guide its future." Lyra glanced to where Talon hovered above the ceremony, his iridescent scales catching the sunlight, then to Professor Saul, who had been her guide and mentor through the darkest times. "I'm honored," she replied, "but my place isn't behind a desk. There's so much more to explore, so much more to learn about the connection we've only just begun to understand." The councilwoman smiled knowingly. "Somehow I expected that answer. Very well. The resources of the Academy will be at your disposal for continued research. Where will you begin?" Lyra looked skyward, beyond the electric storm to the stars beyond. "My father believed the Spirit Engine might eventually enable human Eralis teams to explore beyond our system, to reach stars that conventional propulsion could never approach. I'd like to test that theory." "Ambitious," the councilwoman remarked, "but after what I witnessed, I wouldn't bet against you succeeding." As the ceremony concluded, Lyra found a moment of solitude on one of the Academy's observation balconies. The Nimbus Mountains stretched before her, the Spirit Forest, a verdant patch among the rocky terrain. Above, the electric storm shimmered with its perpetual energy, no longer a barrier, but a gateway to possibilities. She reached into her pocket, withdrawing her father's photograph. The edges were more worn than ever, but his smile remained unchanged, confident, visionary, kind. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "Not just the record, something better." A shadow passed overhead as Talon descended to the balcony, his massive form settling beside her with surprising delicacy. "He knows," came the gentle thought voice, The sky remembers those who truly loved it. Lyra smiled, tucking the photograph away. Ready for our next flight? Talon's wings unfurled in response, catching the afternoon light in prismatic patterns. Always. From another balcony, Professor Saul watched as Human and Aerolus launched into the air, the modified Mistral rising to join them moments later. The three ascended in perfect harmony, their silhouettes merging against the backdrop of the electric storm before disappearing into its luminous depths. Saul smiled, thinking of her old friend Julian and the dream he had never lived to see fulfilled. "You were right all along," she murmured. "The sky belongs to all of us." Above, beyond the Academy's view, Lyra, Talon, and the spirit engine-powered Mistral emerged from the electric storm into the clear upper atmosphere. Below them spread the full majesty of Erythra, its continents and oceans, its cities and wilderness. Above, the stars beckoned with infinite promise. The heart-binding flowed between them, stronger and more nuanced than before. Not just pilot and craft, not just human and Aeralis, but a new entity that was simultaneously both and neither, a bridge between worlds. As they soared higher than any human-piloted craft had ever reached, Lyra felt a profound sense of rightness, of destiny fulfilled yet just beginning. The sky had never been a limit to be conquered, but a frontier to be shared. And in that sharing, humanity had finally found its wings.